In this video, I wanted to talk about trying to make one of my college course assignments AI resistance. Like many professors, it's summertime, and so I'm working on revamping upcoming courses for the fall, and really in a crisis moment about AI usage in the classroom and how to make our assignments more AI resistant. I'm currently taking a workshop at my school with other fellow faculty who are all concerned about learning more about AI, how it could be integrated in the classroom, how students are using it, and how we can make more assignments that are AI resistant. And so we really had a crisis kind of conversation today, testing some of our assignments and seeing that absolutely everything can be done by AI. And so I wanted to talk about one of my favorite assignments that I've used for a decade, and I previously made a video on it. It's called the sociological autobiography. And in this assignment, I have students apply sociological concepts to their own sociological autobiography. So they talk about the demographics of their hometown, they talk about their background of their family, their grandparents, their parents, the demographics, employment, stuff like that. And I want them to apply key sociological concepts to their family, such as education, religion, military, government, immigration, large social processes like that, and especially using C. Wright Mill's book, The Sociological Imagination. And so I thought that this assignment might be a bit AI resistant because it's asking for personal information and a personal story, including family photographs. And so what I did is today I uploaded this assignment, and this assignment is an unwieldy 3 pages long of instruction. And so I took all that 3 pages of instruction, dumped it into ChatGPT, and asked it to write my autobiography. It asked me some clarifying questions: what my name is, my major, my year, the questions that are in the assignment. But it only took me about 2 or 3 sentences to answer all that information, because I didn't add a lot of detail. I just said, government major, women's studies minor, just the most brief information possible. And it wrote me a narrative. And at first it didn't really cite the sources, but I asked it to use in-text citation and it added that. It didn't have a lot of personal details, so the second prompt I used was to add some personal anecdotal information. And so it did that, but each story was only about 1 sentence long, but it did have enough insight to take my particular demographic as a mixed race person and to compare that, I assume, against the demographic of my hometown, Spokane, Washington. And it was able to talk about a narrative of being Asian American growing up in a predominantly white town, which definitely resonated with me. And it certainly could have been my story. So it did an excellent job. It was really able to fill in the backstory. Of course, if I had provided it more details, it would have integrated that. So the only AI part of it that I could tell as an instructor was it was still pretty brief on especially the personal stories. And actually the students make a mistake with this assignment of going on and on and on about their personal narrative, and they forget about the sociology. And I always tell them that it should be a balance, or it should be more on the sociology side, with the personal story just being an example. Actually, ChatGPT does excellent at that correction. It really can focus on the sociology and keep the personal anecdotes to a minimum. But I asked it to increase it and to add some more, and it did that as well. So it absolutely came up with a great backstory that makes absolute sense. If you know anything about immigrants, I talked about my mom being an immigrant from Hong Kong and being biracial. So it was able to fill in that backstory because, if you know that I'm mixed race, Asian, white, and went to a school and grew up in a predominantly white town, then you can make up the stories. It's pretty understandable what those stories would look like. And it actually made up a story about junior high, and it said that being one of 2 Asian Americans in junior high, and it made me think about my junior high experience and what other people of color were in my middle school, and I could not think of one person. Okay, I can just now think of one other mixed race person. So yes, indeed, there were 2 of us mixed race people that I can remember in my middle school So yeah, the story, very plausible. So the point being is that I thought I had an assignment that was based on a real personal narrative and that would make it AI resistant. But indeed, AI can ask you just a few questions to fill out, and it can really fill in a backstory with plausible anecdotal stories to include in the narrative. It can write it as a narrative. It's really good at focusing on the sociological concepts and applying those, perhaps too good, because it's quoting some sociological books that we haven't talked about in class that are a bit advanced. So maybe that would be coming from a sociology major, but that's plausible too. So then I had a second part to this assignment, or a challenge for ChatGPT, is what I did, and maybe it's pulling on this previous assignment. I assume that it pulls on its memory of our conversations. But what I did is I only uploaded 2 photographs from my family album that were family from Hong Kong in the 90s and in the 1950s. And I didn't give the ChatGPT any background information on these stories. I just plopped the photos into ChatGPT and said, come up with a narrative about these 2 photos as a family story. And so the ChatGPT was able to analyze the photograph, the feel of the photograph for the time period, the decade, the clothing that people were wearing, the objects in the room, and it was able to discern that this was either South China or Hong Kong, that it was likely Hong Kong because it blended this colonial influence of the British, and the position of the grandfather, the grandmother in the photograph, talking about Confucius and family hierarchy and authority, and all of this, globalization, blah blah blah, sociology, blah blah blah. So it was able to create a whole story of historical and sociological context of just 2 ancient family photos from the 90s and the 50s, and without any further information. So that was amazing. I also asked Envato to create a video photo trying to replicate the 2 real photos that I had uploaded previously to ChatGPT. I'm now trying to get a different AI system to recreate a similar image. And so I asked them to create a family photograph from a family in Hong Kong in the 1950s and the 1990s. This is what it came up with. And just, one of the things I noticed with AI when I ask it to create Asian people, for example, is they all look exactly the same. And so, yeah, this is what came through in this video as well. So it's very good about reading the real images and all the products that are in that image, but it's not so good at creating its own images of those time, places, and creating distinct people of Asian descent. And so those assignments are now busted, and I'm still even more at a loss of how to create assignments for college classes, especially thinking about the online classes, because of course my in-person classes are really going to be reliant on a lot of exams and verbal examination. But what about my online classes? And I know other professors out there are really feeling this, so I would love to hear more from other professors, and especially the students, like you students who are hacking our assignments. What advice do you have for us to create assignments in the future as well? So definitely share your stories. I'd love to hear both the student and the instructor perspective as we head into another school year.